Hello friends, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Elise, and this is my mystical bookshelf. And today I have another audiobook that I have recently finished. And it's not a Sarah Dessen book. I've been kind of making this intro, like explaining why I haven't made a Sarah Dessen video recently, because I have been really bad about reading Sarah Dessen recently, because I have been obsessed with Hello Kitty Island Adventure. So I'm going to try and limit my gameplay so I can read the rest of Sarah Dessen and finish Lock and Key and make that video, because that would be video number 5. And then I would be like halfway done. So I'm going to still do the Sarah Dessen series. I'm just like slacking because Hello Kitty's fun and I'm like obsessed with that game. And I might make a video on it. I might make a video of like my thoughts on it, but I don't know, because I'm more of a book person. I don't really review video games because I don't really know much about them besides like I enjoy the aesthetic and stuff like that. But if you are interested in me doing a review of Hello Kitty Island Adventure, I guess comment and let me know, because I will totally do a review on it if there's enough interest, because I don't want to like sway too far from books, because I already did that a little bit with dolls, but now I'm not doing dolls, even though I love dolls. I just, talking about them and opening them, it didn't bring me joy. I don't know why, it just didn't. I enjoy talking about books more, but I would talk about a video game. I also would talk about movies too. So I guess with this intro, let me know if you would like me to talk about either video games, I already talked about books, video games, movies, or like TV shows or stuff like that. Because I'm open to I am open to suggestions. I'm sorry, I can't talk. But yeah, so this video is about, I didn't know if I wanted to make it at first, because it is a little controversial, I guess. I don't know. I guess it's kind of controversial, but not really. It kind of just leans more on the religious side of reading, and I don't know if everybody's really interested in that, because I am a practicing Catholic, and I read this book, and it's called Eve's Daughters, and it's faith-based. I think it's Protestant faith-based, and it's like a little bit of Catholicism mixed in, but it's mostly Protestant faith. But overall, it's about familial generational trauma, so that's basically why I'm talking about it. The faith-based stuff is just a nice addition, because I love reading books that are faith-based. That is one thing that is near and dear to my heart, is reading books or listening to books that have to do with faith, because God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit are an important part of my life. And so if I can read something that ties that in, then it brings me joy. And that's why I want to talk about it, because this was a super good book, and it totally made me tear up a little bit listening to it. And it's more than just faith. It's like family trauma as well. It kind of goes through 4 generations of women, and it's so interesting. It was so good. Like, we start out listening to the first generation of Louise and her life, and that takes place in like the 1800s or the 1900s. It takes place during, I think, the First World War, so whatever time era that is, I guess. But so yeah, we learn about Louise and her life in the first part. This book, Eve's Daughters, I'm going to insert a picture of it at some point in this video so that you'll know who it's by and you'll know what it looks like and stuff, because I'm using my phone to record. I'm no longer using my husband's phone, so I can't physically show you the book right now because I'm talking and listening, or talking and using my phone. But yeah, so Eve's Daughters is a book that takes place in 5 parts, and it's a long one. I think it was like over 17 hours long, if I'm not mistaken. And so that was like a super long book for me. I think it was it had to have been longer than 20 hours at least. It was between 17 and 24 hours maybe. Because it took me a couple days to get through it, because if I listened to it about 8 hours of my workday, yeah, I think it took me like 3 days to listen to. So it had to have been a lengthy book in that respect. But it was really good and very touching, and it brought tears to my eyes, and it really showed how powerful that faith can be for some people, and that's what I found most endearing, because Louise put her faith in God, and her and Frederick ended up being okay, and they moved to America together, and that's kind of what starts off the family generation is Louise and Frederick. They have Emma, or not Emma, but no, I think they do have Emma. They have Sophie and Emma. So it's like 4 generations. So Louise is Emma's mom, and Emma is Grace's mom, and Grace is Suzanne's mom. So we start off with Louise and Frederick, and those are Emma's parents, and they have a very strong faith. I think Frederick ends up being a Protestant pastor, and he's super cool. Like, I like Frederick a lot. I really liked his character. And it was very interesting hearing more about the Protestant faith, because I feel like I didn't really know much about it, because I just didn't really look into it very much, I guess. I don't know. But it was very interesting to see that perspective, and a lot of the stuff I was agreeing with, like with the faith-based quotes, and basically it's just like putting your faith in God and following God's will, and that's basically the main thesis statement with most Christian-based religions. It's like trusting God and trusting that He has a plan for your life, and that no matter what happens, it's okay. And that's basically what I got out of this book, and I really liked it. So Louise's story is really interesting. It starts off kind of slow, but as you get more into it, I really connected with Louise, and I'm really happy that she put her faith and her trust in God, because at first she's kind of like on the fence about it. But then she starts praying, and she starts looking to Frederick, and she sees how his faith has impacted him, and she's like, well, I want that for myself too. So I think, and it's interesting because with all of the women's stories, it's like, if you have a good faith and trust in God, then things seem to be going okay. But if you don't have a good trust and good faith in God, then that's when it feels like their lives get a little more muddled, because it's like you don't have that guiding light anymore. Like Suzanne, her story was very interesting because she starts off, like, I didn't know anything about her at first, so she starts off staunchly like agnostic almost, and she doesn't really put her faith or her trust in God, and her marriage was falling apart as a result. And so that was interesting. But in the end, after we learned Suzanne's story, because it goes through each of the women's stories. So the first part is Louise, the second part is Emma, and the third part is Grace, and then it goes through Emma and Patrick, and Patrick is Emma's like love interest, but it wasn't her husband, and that's where it gets interesting actually, because Patrick is Grace's dad, but she never met him, and it's kind of tragic how it happens, honestly. Like, Emma and Patrick they feel like they're meant to be together, because Emma meets Patrick when she's a young woman, but she's already like married off to somebody else, And it's just so sad. Like, the whole trauma starts with Emma, really, because Emma didn't end up being with Patrick. She ended up being with someone who was abusive towards her, and that wasn't, I didn't like that part. That part made me sad, because Emma had such a strong faith when she was a little girl, and then when she grew up to be a young woman, her faith in God kind of dwindled. But I think it only dwindled because of all the stuff that was happening to her. But all the bad stuff that happens isn't, in my opinion, it's not necessarily God's fault. It is the fallen state that our world is in. That's why there's so many bad things that happen, because we have original sin that is stained on us, and that is where the title of the book comes into play, because the book is called Eve's Daughters, and Louise is the one who brings that up first, because she said something along the lines of the sin of Eve is what befalls the earth, and the sin of Adam and Eve is what connects us all together. So I think Emma kind of blames God at some points for the bad stuff that happens to her. But it's not right, obviously. At least it's not right to me. But yeah, at a whole, original sin is what this whole book ties in, especially because our world is just a broken world, and it's really hard to reconcile with that sometimes. And this book does a really good job, like, painting faith and faith-based people in a really empathetic light, because sometimes I think books can paint some people who are faith-based in a negative light and make it seem like they're the bad guys, but this really paints it in an empathetic light, and it really shines a light on Protestant and Catholic faith especially. And there's some misconceptions about Catholicism, but it's not overly, it didn't offend me, is what I'm trying to say. Reading it as a Catholic woman, it didn't offend me. It's just, there's some misconceptions, but I feel like there's misconceptions with everything, so it's just to be expected. But, so it was very good, a very good book. I gave it 5 stars, and I really enjoyed watching Emma's journey, because Emma, in the present, is an 80-year-old woman, and her daughter Grace is like 50-something, and then Suzanne is like late 30s, early 40s, maybe? Probably late 30s. Maybe early 30s. Maybe 35. I'm not really sure. She's probably 35, because if Grace is in her 50s, then she would have to be 35. Because I don't think Grace had her child super young. But it's just interesting going through all of these women's stories and hearing them go through their trauma and explaining their sides of the story, because we hear Emma's side of the story with Patrick, and it's very scandalous because Patrick ended up becoming a Catholic priest, and he ended up having relations with Emma after the fact that he became a priest. So I was like, whoa, I was scandalized reading that, honestly, because I had never come across a book that even touched upon that, or even thought about touching upon it. But I feel like the author handled it really well, and it was definitely painted in an empathetic light, and a sympathetic light too. Like, there was no judgment. Like, yeah, what Patrick did was wrong, and he shouldn't have been with Emma, and he shouldn't have fathered a child with her, but it's about forgiveness too. Like, this book is about following God's will and having faith and trusting Him, and also trusting in His forgiveness, which I think is really powerful, because even priests do wrong things, but they still confess to God, and God forgives them, because God's forgiveness is absolute. And that is the one thing that I think Protestants and Catholics can both agree on, essentially, which I thought was really beautiful to read and listen to. And it was really interesting to see Grace's story too, and how she has such a strong faith in God. And even when she found out that Patrick was her father, she wasn't upset necessarily. I think because she knew Patrick, actually. She knew him as Father O'Dugan. She didn't know him as her dad, but he was a prominent figure in her life and in her story. And I thought it was really cool how all of these were all these women's lives and traumas were intertwined together and interwoven into this family story, and it was just so beautiful. And if you're a faith-based person and you want to read this book, I totally recommend it. It was a great audiobook. Like, honestly, I loved listening to it. It brought tears to my eyes, and I also loved hearing Suzanne's story too, because in the beginning, Suzanne had a really strong faith as well, but her and her husband kind of went off the rails a little bit. And I think it's because they lost sight of themselves and they lost sight of God in their lives. But the ending of the book was very hopeful because it shows that Suzanne was going to try and make it work with her husband instead of getting divorced, which I also thought was really cool. I like how it painted marriage in this light, and it showed that two spouses can make things work if you really try and communicate with one another. And that's what Suzanne and her husband were doing, because they really loved each other in the beginning. And it was kind of sad to see their relationship crumble as Suzanne kept telling her story. But it was very hopeful hearing her say that she felt like she found her faith in God again and wanted to give it another try with her husband instead of divorcing him. And I think she felt so sympathetic because she heard Louise's story from Emma, and then she heard Emma tell her own story, and she heard her mom tell her story too. And it's just really interesting, and it makes you think about the people in your life and what they've been through. Like, it made me think of my grandma. Like, my grandma passed away a long time ago now, like more than 14 years ago actually. And it just makes me sad because I wish I could have talked to my grandma more about her life, because I think I would have gained a really interesting perspective on life hearing her story. And I'm so grateful that I get to hear my mom's stories, because I have a close relationship with my mom, and I love talking to her on the phone, and she always tells me about stories of when she was young and what she was going through, and it's nice to have that perspective. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm getting kind of emotional about it, but I just hope that this video and what I'm saying can resonate with you, and that maybe if you don't have a good relationship with someone in your life, you can contemplate about it and maybe ask them about their stories. Or if you do have a good relationship with the people in your life, that you can ask them about their stories and gain their perspective, because this book was really all about gaining perspective and in life in general. It wasn't even just about faith. It's just about gaining perspective and sympathy and empathy for the people that are in your lives, and really understanding that everybody goes through something. There's always something that someone is going through in their life. And sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes it's worth listening to someone's story, because that's really the main home run in this book for me, is like talking to these people, your dad or your mom or your grandma or your brother or your sister, and like really understanding where their stories are coming from and what kind of trauma or emotions they're feeling in their life. And it was a 5-star. And like, I'm sorry, this video feels like it's getting very deep and very heavy, and this is kind of like the deepest book I've ever talked about, I think. And I don't want to off-put people. I want to share my perspective with you all, because I feel like my channel can be a safe space to come and talk about stuff like this. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, because I enjoy making them, and I really enjoy talking with you all. And I hope that we can chat in the comments, and like I said in the beginning, if you have any suggestions, either about what you want me to read, or things you think I might enjoy watching, or even video games you think I might enjoy, please let me know, because I want to make this channel successful, and I want to really get to know my viewers, and I want to connect with you guys, because that's why I made this video, so we can connect, and it's like talking to my best friends. So thank you. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, friends!